Welcome on in. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Rise and Grind. I'm 72 the Architect, aka Jason B. How's everybody doing this morning? We're going to be producing live on Instagram, Wisdom, and Podbean. So this will be recorded for a podcast. So what are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to talk about reputation and repetition and why they're so relevant. So how's everybody doing today for this May 5th, Cinco de Mayo? For many people that celebrate Cinco de Mayo in Mexico and in the United States. It's a battle about what took place in Puebla. So if you want to look up the history, feel free to do so. But we're not really going to focus on. So why are we going to talk about repetition and reputation? So very important because a lot of these things are very indicative to how we perform in a daily life. Like have we asked ourselves, what kind of person do I want to be, and what does it take to get there? Or do we just kind of leave it at a whim and way for people to try to figure out, like, okay, well, I'll get to it as I please? Are you putting the reps in for the things exactly and the outcomes that you want? So without any further ado, but I would like to use a little bit of excerpts out of the Daily Stoic and as well as the Daily Laws and other books that I've read. So good to see everybody who are coming live into the building, live on Podbean as well as on Wisdom. So for today, what the Daily Stoic would say from Epictetus, they would say that the raw materials for the work of good and excellent person is their own guiding reason. The body is that of the doctor, and the physical trainer, and the farm of the farmers. Now, a lot of times when people really think about, or what I think about that quote exactly from Epictetus's Discourse 3.3.1, it's kind of like, how do professionals be the professionals that they are? Is it just the education, or is it the daily practices? Well, many will tell you it is the daily practices in which you put into life. A lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, a garbage man, a nurse, they all put a lot of experience because they get a lot of experience because of the repetition in their work. You can go to school all you want and train with the greatest scholars in the world. However, you may have to end up coming to understand that at the end of the day, you're going to have to constantly work and craft your experience. And that's so very, very important. So, ask yourself, have I made myself a lifelong project to be who I need to be? Exactly. I am no different. I'm not above reproach, but I definitely understand what it takes to get myself to each level of different phases of my life, as well as maturity. Yes, maturity has a lot to do with what we live with and how we perform and how we receive. But there is another factor. A lot of times we deal with other people, from the grocer to the person that sells us our products to clean ourselves, or the service that we have to go, say, like if tax season just ended not too long ago. So whatever that you are going to be doing in life, there is one connection to another. But how we're perceived in the public versus how we perceive ourselves in private may be two different things. And that has a lot to do with your reputation. So to dive in deep, what kind of person do I want to be? Well, I think a lot of us want to get to a point of a wealth of choice. That's right. A lot of us do want to become wealthy. And why is that? Because we want the free access. We don't want objections, but yet we know that objections are a big part of our lives. And when you object, how others are going to see you versus how you see yourself are very, very important. There is a time and a place when you need to see only yourself, your own opinion, and versus you need to take observance of where you're performing and how you're performing your life. So the wealth of choice can be a financial, it can be an emotional, and it can be spiritual. And sometimes they mix all together in one. They make up a lot of the spaces and keys and accesses as well as denials that we constantly go through. If we look at the keys What does it take? Sometimes, when you're messing with a key and it takes a little bit of more force than it should, maybe the lock is actually a little bit unused, rusty, and needs to be cleaned out. We've got to take an observation of how we approach. When I go and greet somebody, am I looking down at their feet or am I looking at them in the eye? When I deal with a business, do I announce the attendee's name when I see their name badge? Could be very, very small things, but can make big differences. And that's what a lot of us seem to forget. So we end up going to these things called sacrifices, right? They are exchanges in difficulty to doing and receiving or getting what we want versus having things taken away. When I sacrifice as a parent, sometimes I have an excessive amount of stress, but I have to put that aside when I attend my profession. When you actually attend your work, your daily work, that means from the moment that you arise and you put your feet up on the ground, you are now the professional you. Right. You heard it from me. You are the professional you. It doesn't matter what you want to be in the long run, but today, right now, is the most important part of your moment of anything that you will deal with. And that also leads into our presumptions. We presume a lot of things and we allude to a lot of our experiences. But why do we do that? Because we feel a lot of times, because of our experience or lack of experience, that we will know the better and that we will make a decision or a series of decisions that gets us what I want. Some people feel like, well, hey, that's kind of arrogant and ambiguous. Yes, it might be. But are we really clear on the optics of what we're doing and what we're showing? This is why it's so very important, why many of the Stoics and greatest philosophers throughout the world have said, do not reveal your goals to others. Do not tell people your plans because you may be defiling what you are attempting or opting to achieve. Yes, your achievements have many different elements. It is the practice, it is the study, it is the belief, it is the manifestation, which many of us have come to learn about, especially in the last 10 years. We have heard from books like The Secret, Ask and It's Given, um, Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, the 48 Laws of Power, the Daily Stoic, Ego is the Enemy. These are a series of books that all focus really on the same essential thing that makes you the best person that you can be today. So, how do we get the optics to reality? Yes, reality. And there are so many different combinations in which you can do it. Some feel like, hey, don't say nothing until it's done. Some feel like, hey, if I say it, I will be it, I believe it, and therefore it is. But that also can be an illusion. A lot of us have that little saying, FOMO, fear of missing out, or we say, fake it till you make it. And why are these things made up? Well, that's the trick in what we deal with on an everyday basis. If we look at, what is on the outside of us as opposed to what is in the inside, you have to have, in my opinion, a level of balance. Yes, a level of balance is going to mean more to you and the people as well as the things that you're going to work with. That means your relationships, your friends, your family, your coworkers, and the language that you use. In Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, the first agreement he states, be impeccable with your word. What does that mean and why is it so important? It's ahead of everything else because what you say, what you profess, it will go out and it will come back, good or bad. It doesn't care. We call that the universal reaction of laws of attraction, right? And if you're not aware of the laws of attraction, there are many writings that can lead you into the way of discussing and understanding what they are. Some people might describe them as karma, and what you put out is what you get back. But karma is not just so always that simple. There's more things to it that we have to understand. I am not an overly worldly scholar, but I am a student. I'm also a practitioner of Stoicism. I may not always have it perfectly down, but again, I manicure the experience. That's my optics. The more practice I put into it, the better in which the life I live is received for me as well as others. So that is part of the optics. But then the reality is not everything that we want do we get. Sometimes there are rejections. Yes, I've talked about rejections before. Rejections literally show you that either it's immature or mature, or the opportunity was not meant for you. And that's sometimes for our feeling sense inconvenient. Yes, we're talking the conveniences now of reality and the optics. What reality will tell you may not be what you have in your head. Like, hey, I assumed that this product was going to work for me and it was going to make my life so much better. How many of us have actually said that? Let's use example for our cell phones. Maybe you might be watching this live right now on Instagram. Maybe you might be listening through a podcasting platform like Wisdom or Podbean, or maybe perhaps you might be listening to it recorded and think, well, what is Jason really trying to say? Well, I'm really looking at the basics, keeping your mind on the matters that are important to you. But remember that you're going to serve many. It's not always going to make sense. You're going to go through trials and tribulations. If you can remember far back to your adolescence when you were a child and being told what to do, as opposed to when you became an adult and started making clear decisions for yourself, those are parts, very bit important parts of reality. But they start the journey to be able to you to discern. Now, a lot of us, we hope that we had had good programmers, teachers, and mentors. But at the end of the day, you're going to change your beliefs constantly through the ages and the era. That's right. You're going to change the way that you think about when you're 21 years old as opposed to when you're 41 years old are maybe significantly different. Maybe they become better. Maybe they just have allowed you to be the best person you possibly could be. When I look back, hey, 30 years, my high school reunion's coming up. 30 years ago, I graduated high school. I went to Manteca High, and the many of those people I don't have contact with. Now, when I tell my kids, like, hey, the people that you go to school with, a lot of them you may not keep in contact, but you will grow and adapt to different people and conversations and relationships, friendships. There was a wisdom spoken to me a long time ago. If you have 5 friends in life, true friends, you will be a very wealthy person. But what makes an actual friend versus what is something of an acquaintance and alliance, an ally? They give you allowances and tokens for a pass or no pass. So when we look at the outside, optics of what we deal with and what we see, are we really antiquated and understand what we are dealing with on a daily basis? That means your emotional output, your emotional input. This means the emotional intelligence that makes up the IQ. Yes, of how smart you are, right? So when we look at what decides those things, what tools am I given? How am I any different from anyone else? I would have to really go down to, how do I say things? What do I say? How do I choose how I act? Choosing the right action is very subjective because some people may consider you selfish and impersonal. And some people might say, do you, boo boo? Hey, it's all great until there is a cost. And believe it or not, there is a cost with internal and external things as well as people. So when we look at all these things and what makes the vision, the artistry, the beautiful parts of what we live with, we have to begin to understand, hey, what levels do I exchange and what levels do I sacrifice? That's a very, very important thing. So who decides? A rich person, a poor person? For example, lately, I've been asked, what do I think about Roe versus Wade? My opinion is I have no official opinion about it. Why? Because I'm more concentrated on the exact place of my living so that when it comes to a choice, if it becomes something that where it's democratically voted on, I will adequately make the choice without being a target. But what I do notice a lot is I've been hearing and in casual conversations how men are actually the culprits in making these decisions against women's bodies. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but guess what? Men and women both have made this issue the way that it is. It's not perfect. It's not going to be good. Not everyone's going to agree on it. Everyone has an interpretation. Well, it's a command from God, or it's against humanity, or hey, this is a liberty and right more than about life. A lot of people who are smarter than I am can take on that debate, who take on that discussion. But while that is going on, I choose patience within myself. I choose not to actually get overreactive. When women address me, it's like, you're a part of the problem. And I'm like, interesting that you say that, but are you prepared for the rebuttal? A lot of times they may not be. Are they able to listen to me as I am able to listen to you? Now, that's a different part of maturity and your reputation. People are going to understand and live with you and like you or dislike you, judge you constantly. We deal with things in society that maybe doesn't always make sense at the time, but over time, we then can pivot and choose, just like maturity. But where does that come from? That comes from the repetition, the practice. Do I take time to listen more than react? A lot of us don't even think about those natural reactions. When people are asking me those same questions about the politics of what's going on, I ask them, do you understand your constitution? Many of them can't even retort anything about the Constitution other than the First Amendment and the Fifth. But there are many more different parts of the amendments and what goes under the categories of of which. So when we think about what goes in the freedom and the right to speak and address our grievances, the First Amendment itself, it has several categories and describers of how the framers got to that decision. They didn't have it all right off the bat, but it is a living document in which the processes of our lives here in the United States that we follow. Now, could it be implicated to other parts of the world? Absolutely. That's called diplomacy. How that diplomacy is delivered is the outside of us, the outside of our country. Some people will say, "Well, Americans are arrogant and they're mean and they just don't know shit." But it's like if people really from the outside world really looked at how diverse that the United States really is, we're not all the same. I may have different beliefs from the West, from the East Coast, or the South, or the Midwest, and vice versa. But that doesn't mean that we can't collaboratively and get along. I've been networking with a multitude of people from around the world, from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Libya, Algiers, the UK, France, Germany, even people in Russia that I know. And you know how all that's possible? Technology. Yes, technology can be a great thing, but it also could be kind of a hard thing. And it's like a lot of people will blame, well, it's social media's responsibility for putting out the perceptional values of how bad we possibly can be. But the one thing that we cannot escape is our participation. If it's not there and it's not used, is it really true? Now, a lot of times we will give every reason to blame on the outside of experience of why things are so horrible, but it's the internal system in which it decides of how that process is enacted. When I talk about politics, I am actually looking at an optics of not having a political agenda or side. That has drastically changed in the last 10 years for myself. I used to be a hardline Democrat. When people ask me, and I'm independent with no party affiliation, I choose what I want. I don't need to tell you my opinion. Same with beliefs. That means my God, my belief system, what I internally identify to the universe. Do I need to declare it? No. Why? Because the more that I give people to give a decision point about me and my reputation, they presume and assume about my behavior and the styles of decisions I will make. The same goes for you. Are you giving away too much? We have cellular phones that constantly track all of our movements, our words, our decisions, our clicks. Are we actually taking time for our human experience? That is something very, very important that a lot of us do forget, our consciousness of mindfulness. And that makes a culture. I was recently told, even by my own significant other and people from outside the country, that says Americans have no culture. But see, that's the beautiful thing. That's their optics. Unless they live here and be with here, we can't say authentically, what is this? What is that? It's a melting pot of a multitude of all the world coming here to make a life of prosperity. So, how does that actually matter in the long run? Because it allows people to make a choice for themselves. Now, it's all not always fair. Granted, understood. There can be some balance, and there are inequities, there are injustices. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of colorism and there is a lot of status, but that also is based into reputation. The rich should have to pay for the poor should have to be able to be taken care of. There should be universal health care, universal income. But what is any different from what we do here to where we do everywhere else? That is the beautiful thing about democracy, and it also comes with taxes and attachments. Not all of them are great, but not all of them are good either. It's for us to decide and how we enact those things. So, how, let's getting really back into the issue. What practices do we put in place? Do you practice the wealth of your choice? That's right, the wealth of your choice without it having to be delayed or over leveraged. Yes, I mean leveraged. We have a thing called debt. Now, in the modern era, since I was probably about 10 years old, I've come to understand that debt was a part of a natural way of life. But at some point, debt wasn't always a part of natural life. I didn't remember debt when I was 8 years old very much, other than what my mom would say: I have to pay my bills. My credit card is due. I delayed my having to have more for me based on the borrowing of today. There are a lot of financial books to tell you how to invest your wealth, how to invest your time in yourself. Be true to thyself, as they would say. And where does that come from? Many people don't know. I'll leave that for you to decide. When we look at actually these quotes that are meaningful mantras that make up the experience, are we really thinking of how the repetition and the reputation has been the scholar to teach us in our daily practice of our life? These are important questions. Have you taken the time to do so? So then we start to look at the good, the bad, and the in between. What is truly good? What is bad? A lot of people will disparage of how the level of your prosperity. So if you became wealthy, let's say you won the Mega Million Powerball and you won 500 million, and the rules on which that money is dealt, you have to pay a percentage of taxes. 40% may be going to the tax man. And then you get angry, like, why is that? And all of a sudden, from poor to rich, you now are arguing the side of the rich man as opposed to the poor man. Would you really significantly give out your income? Like you said, if I won the mega millions, would I really give out as much as I said? Or would greed actually be in thyself? Right? Now, if we really think about all these things and how the good and the bad, and yes, there is another category, the in between. What makes the in between? It's our thirst for knowledge. It's our drive for better, the appreciation and the gratitude, and actually what we live with on an everyday. You know, whom do you whom do you know is wealthy? Whom do you know is poor? How many people have you actually are integrating with in a wealthy circle versus non-wealthy circle, right? They say, show me the top 5 people or top 7 people who you hang around, and I'll show you who you are. This isn't an accident. That's the beautiful thing about me. I go back and forth between wealthy and poor and in between, in all those categories. But still, at the end of the day, I am building my own personal wealth. And what does that mean to me as the architect, Jason B? That means that I can live in a balance where I'm not over leveraged, over influenced. I literally level out my time and availability to outside influences. I've spent a lot of time creatively working with the inside that actually makes me decide to becoming a better father, a better if employee, a better son, a better friend. But like I tell all my friends, I have no expectations of you and your performance. I will greet you with a glass of water, and if you're hungry, I will feed you. But I have no side to pick if your quarrels and qualms. A lot of people feel that if you're my friend, you will always be in my side. But how much of a lie is that really in the long run? We expect too much of on the outside experience, but very seldomly do we truly trust within ourselves, let alone to be trusted. We think about all these things like how is it the same and how is it fair? May not always be fair, may not always be antiquated. So, where do I spend? That's right. What do you spend and where do you spend? Do you spend on objects, ideas, movements, remedies? These are all categories of what shows has your devotion and your beliefs. You know, have I made myself a lifelong project? Do you take yourself that seriously or not serious enough? It deals with the practices and the studies, the habits, the beliefs, and your trusts. Are they flexible enough to serve you as well as others? That's something that I've learned being 49 years old, that I actually can say, you know what? I've made a series of bad choices, but I've also made a series of good choices. I love my kids. I love my significant others. I love my parents. I love my friends. But how far does that love really go? Guess what? It's not as far as you might think. Now, people will say, well, you have to have absolute devotion. But when your kids grow to a certain age and they fly off and go to do their own nesting, create their own families, you would hope that they come back to really appreciate where they got their foundation. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and other times it does. But it all depends on your behavior and your maturity. If you look at actually how your maturity is going to serve you versus not just serving others, then you are the wealthy person. But being wealthy also means that you need to be communal. Why do I say that? Because all the exchanges that you've gotten along the way to build your wealth is based on exchanges, the level of your exchange, the trust, the truth that you tell. Now, I will tell you constantly, not everything, I don't trust anyone with everything. I have to secure some just to myself. That gives me a level to not be used by others so easily. But I will willing to exchange good works with good works and sometimes bad works with bad works. That's learning. Learning becomes mastery. Mastery is something that I don't really say that I really have. It's something that you just kind of do and you get better and better over the ages. And that is a maturity of your reputation. Me as a 49-year-old or soon to be 50-year-old man is quite different from the 30-year-old man that I once was. You know what? When I walk into a room, I'll greet you with a smile and not always object to you. I used to walk into places and audio spaces where I try to flex my intelligence, and all that I got was a rebuke like, oh my God, that guy's here. When I pay attention to my reputation, I really am paying attention to the way that I perform, the way that I exchange. How I trust you. I trust you until you give me a reason to not trust with the thing that I'm working with you on. Not all your decisions are going to be agreeable. I'm going to argue. And that's the hard part. When people argue with us, are they really doing it for their own egotism, or are they actually doing it because it just doesn't make sense enough to continue? But see, that's the difficult part, you know? And this is why I choose no longer to be a part of any political party, because not in my opinion do enough Republicans agree with really each other, and not enough Democrats really believe with each other where they cohesively work. They create these ideologies, the masses. I call it being sheep. Many of us call it sheep. And some people say, well, how dare you say that? However, I do say that was consciousness. That allows me to pivot and work with others in such a way where I can be appreciated. Recently, I was on Clubhouse and I integrated myself between several different cultures, from Muslims and Jews and Christians and atheists. And not once ever, when I was asked, what are you? Did I ever say? I just say, I believe in God, and that's it. Hey, I don't need to tell you how, why, or what, prescription of that interpretation of what those things interpretate me. But I will encourage you to get to know who I am and the way that I perform. Now, a lot of people have responded, yo, Jason, I love the way that you talk. I love the way that you are. Hey, I appreciate you. Sometimes I've been called a hypocrite. And yes, I have been a hypocrite at times, but that doesn't mean that I always stay that way. That is repetition of the reputation. if you choose a different way, it is very hard for people to who've always had you under their thumb to contain you. That's right. A lot of people say, well, you're this way, so therefore you are that person. But see, we don't always stay the same. There are times we say, well, maybe that thinking was not quite right. Maybe that level of decision making was absolutely wrong and I choose differently. It doesn't mean that I'm subservient or submissive or that I'm stupid. It just means that I'm choosing a better process than which I can work for and work with. That is study and practices. That's right. You practice to become the better person every single time, and there are times you will fail. But a part of the appreciation of failure is that, you know what? I heard it on a discussion with somebody yesterday who said, I asked my kids of what did you fail at today? And it's not so bad because when he's asking as a father to his children, he's literally saying that I'm giving myself and my kids space to see their learning process. And he would say that the failures are the golden tokens because they are the process in which not to do or not succeed, right? So that goes on to the belief system. Our self-describers, I'm an atheist, I'm a Christian, I'm that. I'm a Gemini, I'm a Libra, I'm a Sagittarius. These things are not indicative to the totality of who you are. Know who you are and who you're dealing with. As Robert Greene would say in his 48 Laws of Power, number 19, and I will quote him in saying, he said, swallow the impulse to offend. And even if another person seems weak, this satisfaction is meager compared to the danger that someday he or she will be in a position to hurt you. What does that mean? That talks about power and like, hey, what's been done to you? Be mindful, even when people are not as good as you, because they may be the leader of tomorrow, right? It's a big deal if you ask me in the long run. And we have to always be conscious. You know, that's the big thing. Well, that's all the time that I have for Rise and Grind. And I just want to say thank you so much. The app may have frozen, or the tech actually may have frozen. So I just want to say thank you all for coming out to Rise and Grind, and we'll see you all the next time.